At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit activeday.com to apply.
Welcome back to Expose Scandalous Files of the Elite. I'm your host, Jim Chapman, and we're back with this 33rd episode of the trial of Sean Combs, and today I'm going to cover the defense closing arguments. Now, I brought you the prosecution's closing arguments in the last episode, and in this one, I'm going to summarize those closing arguments. Just too long to cover word for word every single thing that was said during these closing arguments, but this is going to be eye-opening. I'd love to know your opinion after I'm done with this one. Now, kicking off the closing arguments is Marc Agnifilo, and throughout this, I'm just going to refer to him as Marc. Now, Marc starts it off by saying, quote, "This has been a tale of two trials. First, there's the trial as told by the witnesses, the text messages, and the videos. The second trial is the trial as told by the mouths of prosecutors that I submit to you is the false trial. This is an exaggerated trial that is not the real trial." Then he goes on to say the trial of the evidence is about the lifestyle. You want to call it swingers, but whatever you want to call it, that's what it is. And that's what the evidence shows. Marc recounted positive things that Combs' former employees said about him. Quote, "Let's talk for a second about what the evidence shows about Sean Combs. Sean Combs has become something that is very, very hard to be. Very hard to be. He is a self-made, successful black entrepreneur. Combs has created wonderful, sophisticated, real businesses that have stood the test of time. Did they always like him? No way. Let's not even go there. But they loved him. They didn't want to leave him." Marc then praised Sean Combs for the businesses that he built, businesses that he said focused on diversity. Marc said that Combs was practicing diversity, equity, and inclusion, known as DEI, before it was a mandated practice. Quote, "He was doing this in 1993 as a 24-year-old all by himself." He went on to say, "No witnesses said they were part of the racketeering conspiracy or worked in the enterprise," and he balked at the idea that Sean Combs' business was a racketeering enterprise. He said no witnesses said they were part of a racketeering conspiracy or worked in the enterprise. Quote, "You don't hear that from the evidence, and you didn't hear that from any of the witnesses." Marc told the jury that 6 of Sean Combs' 7 kids are in the courtroom, along with Combs' mother. And he said the jury should know about Combs' character. Quote, "The man takes care of his people." He said this is evident through his relationship with Jane. Combs paid for her home where she could take care of her child. I hope she's having a nice day, but you know what she's doing. She's in a house that he's paying for. And Marc sarcastically talked about the searches of Sean Combs' homes by Homeland Security in Los Angeles and Miami Beach in 2024. Quote, "Boxes of Astroglide taken off the street. Whoa, I feel better already. Artificial lubricant? Not for me. The streets of America are safe from Astroglide." He went on to say, "And they got the baby oil, and they found the personal use drugs. They did it. It's all worth it. Thank goodness for that response team. They found the Astroglide. they found the baby oil, and they found like 5 Valium pills. Way to go, fellas. Marc said that none of Sean Combs' alleged victims called law enforcement. Quote, they do call somebody, though. They call civil plaintiff lawyers. That's who they call. This isn't about crime. It's about money. He went on to say Cassie Ventura sued Sean Combs for $30 million because Sean Combs has $30 million. This very investigation came out of the civil case. No $30 million, no lawsuit. No $30 million, no lawsuit, no criminal case. But that's why we're here. We're here because of the money. He went on to say, we owned the domestic violence. We didn't run away from it or challenge the 2 ex-girlfriends who testified against Sean Combs, Cassie or Jane, about it. I don't think we asked her a single question to challenge anything she said about being hit, being kicked, or being dragged. And then Marc referenced the social media statement that Ventura made after CNN in 2024 published that video of her getting the shit beat out of her. Quote, she was very precise and very clear about what the issue was for her. The issue for her was domestic violence. When she says domestic violence is the issue, I'm asking you to believe her. Marc told the jury that between Combs and Ventura, the suit was settled the next day, and Ventura won. He said the suit demanded $30 million, although he reminded the jury that Ventura testified it was settled for $20 million. Quote, if you had to pick a winner in this whole thing, it's not hard to pick Cassie. And then he pointed out that Combs is sitting in jail while waiting the outcome of this trial. He said Combs and Ventura were not part of a racketeering conspiracy. Quote, it's a real relationship, and they were in love. Cassie is no joke, and that's why he loved her. She matched him. He felt like she was like him. Marc called their relationship and this shocked me, quote, a great modern love story, telling the jury they could cry at text messages that Combs and Ventura exchanged, professing their love for each other. He said Ventura eventually made an adult choice to leave that relationship in 2018, and she felt no pushback from Combs. Quote, she was always free to leave. She chose to stay because she was in love with him. Marc then addressed Combs and Ventura's sex life, saying, quote, she's a woman who actually likes sex. Good for her. She's beautiful. She should. She's intense. She's unafraid. They were their best selves when it came to sex. They fought when it came to other women. He went on to say, out of scores of text messages admitted into evidence in the trial, you won't find one where she's like, I didn't like the sex. I'm not attracted to you. I don't like our sex life. It's not for me. He said Ventura and Combs matched up when it comes to sex. Quote, I guess you could call them swingers. I guess you could call it a lifestyle. Marc also reminded the jury that Kid Cudi confirmed that Cassie Ventura played him, saying, quote, she played him good too. She played them both. He referenced the prosecution's argument that Ventura was scared of Combs. Quote, she lied to him for a long time, over and over and over, as she had another relationship with another singer-songwriter under his nose. She's not afraid of him. Marc called Ventura a gangster, pointing to the burner phone that she used to stay in touch with Kid Cudi and saying she was trying to pull off lying to both men. Marc addressed the 2024 kidnapping allegation made by Capricorn Clark. Now, if you'll remember, she said she was kidnapped and held for 5 days taking lie detector tests after Sean Combs' jewelry went missing. He said, Clark is a little out there. She testified at the trial that she wanted her life back. The world Sean Combs created and is at the center of. That's the life she wanted back. She said she couldn't work in the industry after leaving Combs' employment. She also acknowledged that she reached out to Combs for work years later after she stopped working for him. Marc told the jury that Clark had a crush on Combs and wanted their platonic relationship to become more. He recounted Clark's testimony about the lie detector testing when she said a large man, 5 times her width, threatened to throw her in the East River if she didn't pass. And Marc also mocked the idea that prosecutors said the 2024 kidnapping was an underlying act for the racketeering charge. Now, if you remember, each day after hours of testing, Clark had said one of Combs' security guards drove her home. So Mark likened this experience to the jury that spends long hours in the courthouse each day and then goes home. Quote, "You're about as kidnapped as she was kidnapped. It's unsettling. That's the whole reason investigators use it. I have no doubt she was unsettled, but she was not kidnapped." Mark also said that Combs had a starring role in, quote, "A Raisin in the Sun," which was a Broadway show, y'all, around the time that these lie detector tests were given. Quote, "He's starring on Broadway. He is involved in the middle of a very significant voter drive campaign called Vote or Die, and he's running all these companies. Do you think he's waiting on the edge of his seat? How's that lie detector test coming back? I can't wait to see if she passes." He couldn't care less. He had nothing to do with it, Mark said. Mark then recounted the kidnapping allegation that Capricorn Clark testified to, who said that Combs came to her home with a gun and then brought her to rapper Kid Cudi's house in December of 2011. He said that Clark was probably so honored that Combs finally came to her house for the very first time that if he asked her to take a trip to the moon, she'd go, and he knows that. He then pointed out that Kid Cudi testified that Clark didn't mention a gun when she called them that day. Quote, "Had Capricorn said gun, Cudi would have remembered gun. You're not going to forget gun. Gun is one of the fear words in our language." Kid Cudi also didn't mention a gun to the responding officer, Mark said. And he added that the officer wrote up the incident as trespass. Mark also knocked Capricorn Clark's credibility and the validity of her story. He said Clark had to lie about the gun so it didn't seem like she was helping Sean Combs. Quote, "She doesn't want to give the impression that she's like part of this of her own volition." Mark acknowledged that Combs was at Kid Cudi's home that day. He acknowledged that the responding officer caught the Escalade license plate that was linked to Combs' company, and Mark said the incident showed that Combs is a fighter who would look to a good old-fashioned fist fight to confront Kid Cudi. So it'd be out of character for Combs to plot a car bombing. Quote, "There's no evidence that he had anything to do with that Porsche." He went on to say that blowing up the car of rapper Kid Cudi would have been a coward's way to go out. Quote, "He's going to fight him. He's not going to blow up his car." Mark said the investigation into the arson was a terrible investigation, and he asserted that the investigator didn't know what happened to fingerprints that were recovered. He underscored the investigator's testimony that partial DNA profile from the scene was consistent with a female. Mark said the instances of Sean Combs offering Intercontinental Hotel personnel money following that 2016 assault against Cassie was about preventing bad publicity and was not a bribe under relevant law because there was no law enforcement investigation and Combs wasn't trying to hinder law enforcement. And come on now, Mark. We all know that is bullshit. That was a fucking bribe. Mark said police were nowhere near the situation at the hotel, and Ventura didn't want police involvement. He said law enforcement only came hours later to an apartment because Combs was banging on the door. Mark referenced Combs' repeated attempts to reach out to Ventura after she left that hotel. Quote, "He's calling her and she's freezing him out, as she should. He's just trying to get her attention." Mark said Combs did not witness tamper in the case of Mia in 2023 and 2024 during the federal investigation. The defense attorney suggested the government misled the jury when it suggested D-Rock was trying to give Mia money to influence her. Mark showed the jury texts they had seen earlier in the trial from a conversation between Mia and D-Rock when she told him she was out of money. D-Rock responded, offering Mia help if she needed it. Mark then turned back to the topic of Mia. He said Mia testified with a false persona in court. He said the bubbly person in the birthday video that the jury watched, that's Mia's true personality. And Mia falsely testified that Combs sexually assaulted her. Quote, "This was not unwanted sexual contact," unquote. Mark told the jury that Combs and Mia had consensual sexual contact, and the jury should believe that because they saw a text from Combs to Mia when he threatened to tell Cassie about it. Quote, "Cassie doesn't know about it, and Mia doesn't want Cassie to know about it." Marc questioned why Combs would threaten to tell Ventura about something he wrongfully did to Mia. He referenced a positive social media post that Mia posted about Combs, asserting that was how she really felt. He showed the jury the scrapbook Mia created for Combs' 45th birthday and called it an act of love. He then showed the jury a photo Mia posted of a group of people, including several of Combs' employees, and he said, think of a word or a phrase that comes to mind. Joy, family, home, belonging. He asked, racketeering enterprise? This is your racketeering enterprise, folks, while referencing that picture. Marc said there's no evidence to support the government allegation that Sean Combs and his enterprise conspired to distribute or possess with the intent to distribute a controlled substance. He said the jury has heard no allegation that Sean Combs is selling drug, and he acknowledged there's no doubt he had personal use drugs. He's obviously got a drug problem. He said it's true the assistants picked up the drugs for Combs, but, quote, the purpose of these businesses and enterprise had nothing to do with getting him drugs. Quote, these are the things he did with his girlfriend and they did them together. There's no indication that he's selling it to Cassie or Jane or somehow moving the drugs or distributing the drugs. He said the sex life of Sean Combs and Cassie was, quote, just not sex trafficking. It's his girlfriend. I suppose you could sex traffic your girlfriend if you sell her into prostitution, he said, adding there was no suggestion Combs was making any money off freak-offs. Quote, they're swingers. This is their lifestyle. Marc said the evidence was overwhelming that Ventura wanted to participate in these freak-offs, but he gave the jurors a hypothetical situation in which one partner liked the particular sex and the second partner didn't, but knew the act made the first partner happy. He asked, do you still not want to do it? Where does that land on the I want to do it, I don't want to do it spectrum? Marc reiterated that this lifestyle choice was also Ventura's choice. Quote, she's ready to go, and God bless her. She is. She's beautiful, sexy woman, and that's what she deserves to be if that's what she wants to be. And that's what she wanted to be. Marc also knocked the government's statement in its closing argument that not all the freak-offs were non-consensual. He then asked, how's he supposed to know? Marc then read a few sexually explicit messages Ventura sent Combs referencing the freak-offs, and he said, quote, there was nothing that would say to him that that was against her will. Marc then went back to the March 2016 incident at that hotel, and he said, quote, messages leading up to that incident showed Combs and Ventura were workshopping a freak-off together, and that's how he termed it. Marc showed the jury parts of the surveillance video, but not the parts where Combs is being violent with Ventura. He acknowledged those parts of the video were terrible. He also used the footage to argue that Combs was coming after Ventura to get a cell phone. He said that Ventura later went back into the room with Combs and the security officer because, quote, the room was not a scary place. He suggested the drugs explain Combs' behavior in that video, saying, you're walking around in the middle of the day in a hotel with just a towel and socks on. So what do you think caused that? He also suggested that Cassie was never raped, saying, quote, she had plenty of time to change her story to say it happened. He then referenced a text in September after that rape supposedly happened that said, I had a lot of fun with you. Thanks for the night. I told myself I didn't want anything to happen, and I'm not tripping on it. I know you aren't either. Marc said her now husband, who she was dating at the time, FaceTimed her in the middle of the night when she was with Combs. And when her husband found out that she was with Combs, she lied and said she was raped. He said Ventura changed her story because Combs sent her a text saying, quote, I know I look bad to you. I could tell I didn't turn you on yesterday. I fell off, but I'm about to get my shit together. And the government argued that that was an admission from Combs that she didn't want to have sex. Ventura also testified she later had consensual sex with Combs in October. Quote, if there was really a rape, she would not have gone back and had consensual sex. So there's no rape, Marc said. Marc pointed to Cassie Ventura's answer when she was asked what kind of pain Combs put her through. Quote, I think bigger more than anything, it was our own personal shame in having to carry things out that were shameful to him. He went on to say, in a sex trafficking case, the most painful thing for her was to unburden him of his shame and carry around his shame. That was the answer. She could have answered that question any one of a million ways. The reason it's beautiful is the only person who could answer this question that way is a person who's truly, truly in love with the other person. And all you need to know is that answer. He went on to say both Cassie and Jane were saying this was an essential, vulnerable, deep part of himself, and he trusted me to go there with him, meaning the freak-offs. He said Jane answered a similar question in the same way, talking about how she felt the nights at the hotels with Combs were something special between them. Quote, she was basically saying, listen, I'm going to be very vulnerable, very special for you, and I'm doing it because I love you. He went on to describe how in exchange, Jane wanted to be treated special. Quote, that's a lot of things, but that's not sex trafficking. Mark said there's nothing to Cassie Ventura's claims that Sean Combs held her back as an artist. He reminded the jury they heard from Capricorn Clark that Ventura got the lion's share of resources and attention from the record label from 2007 to 2010. He also reminded the jury that Clark said Ventura was a recording artist and had talent, but wasn't a natural star. He then moved on to Jane, and he said Jane was motivated by wanting nice things and trips that she posted on social media. He said Jane loved Combs, but she was focused on what she was going to get out of it that the world can see. And Mark reiterated the argument he made about Combs' sexual relationship with Cassie, saying, quote, the government said they're not saying every single hotel night was a sex trafficking situation. Well, which ones were? And how's Sean Combs supposed to know the difference? Mark also said Jane was used to moving in circles with celebrities like Combs, and he reminded the jury that they learned who her child's father is and what rapper she was with in Las Vegas of 2024. Quote, she's comfortable being in that sort of strata. That's just how she moves. He said Combs took care of Jane and her child because the child's father, quote, dropped the ball. And of course, we've since found out the child's father is 50 Cent. So that's a shot at 50 right there. He described Combs paying rent for Jane's L.A. house as a gesture of niceness that shouldn't be construed as a catalyst to sex trafficking. Mark said Jane is receiving pretty crappy child support, as he termed it, from the child's father, 50 Cent. Now, Jane testified at trial she receives about $5,000 per month in child support. Quote, guess who's giving her more? The one who has no responsibility for that child at all. He's picking up the ball for someone who seems to have dropped the ball for his own kid, and Combs is still paying rent for Jane's house, even though Jane testified against him. They made a deal, and he kept it. Good for him. He said Jane agreed to the nights with him at the time, regardless of the regret after the fact. And he reminded the jury that Jane never gave an explanation for slamming Combs' head during a 2024 fight. He said Jane's account of that June 18th incident just didn't make sense, saying her violence towards Combs was odd and her timeline seemed off. He also questioned how much Combs actually hit her, but he did acknowledge that Combs was violent with her. Quote, there's obvious physical contact. He then suggested Jane may have been trying to set up Combs in that incident because she knew there was an ongoing federal investigation, saying she might have picked a fight with Combs and then called that male entertainer to come over so she could create a narrative. Mark mocked the government for calling to the witness stand only two men who said they had sex with Cassie while Sean Combs watched, saying the two men who were said to have had sex with Ventura during freak-offs both testified that they aren't prostitutes and that they didn't travel across state lines to meet Ventura and Combs. He's really reaching on this one. Both men actually did say during their testimony they received money from Combs and Ventura after having sex with them. So Mark referred to an escort service that we talked about a lot, Cowboys for Angels, and they frequently provided these men for the freak-offs. And he suggested the legality surrounding such an escort service is vague, and that Sean Combs would have assumed its operations were on the up and up. Quote, why is he supposed to know more than them if they're in the business and they're sending the escorts? Of course, talking about Cowboys for Angels. Quote, people pay for an escort's time. If the two people meet and they choose to have sex, it looks to me like it's not illegal. There are all these companies around the world doing this, and Cowboys for Angels is just one of them. He added that their existence is evidence in Combs' mind that what they were doing was okay. He said Cowboys for Angels still appears to be in business today. Come on. Everybody knows that an escort service is illegal. He also argued that the videos of freak-offs were homemade porn. He said, in every porn movie, I'm assuming the actors get paid to have sex. How is that not prostitution? I don't know, and you don't either. Marc also argued against racketeering conspiracy charges, noting no one was indicted with Combs. He alleged that the prosecution arranged testimony about Combs' guns to make the jury think he's a bad person, saying, quote, they brought out a big, nasty, scary gun to show you. For what purpose? To make you think he's a bad person who has big, scary guns? And if they're going to do that, don't you think they would have an obligation to put a witness on the stand to tell you where they were? At what point do you stop trusting the government? In wrapping up his closing argument, Marc told the jury that it would take courage to acquit Sean Combs, but he asked them to do the right thing and acquit him of all the charges against him. Quote, you should feel bold. You should feel the courage that you will need to call this as you see it, and I'm asking you to summon that courage and to do what needs to be done. He is not a racketeer. He is none of these things. He is innocent. He sits there innocent, and at that point, he points directly to Combs, and then he says, quote, return him to his family and those who have been waiting for him. And that was it for the defense, and the prosecution had a short rebuttal. Maureen Comey said, quote, the defense just spent a whole lot of energy trying to blame his victims and the U.S. government for his lies, his threats, and for his inexcusable behavior, tossing up excuse after excuse for his inexcusable behavior. But make no mistake, this trial was about how Sean Combs, in his world, no was never an option. She went on to say he flew escorts across the country, watched them have sex while he masturbated, and then he handed them cash. His money is for sex, the sexual performance, not for time. And that is prostitution. Now, some of the men might have been willing to do these acts regardless of money, but when they got cash at the end of the night, they were getting paid for sex. It's irrelevant what the escorts thought about the interaction. The law pertains to Combs' state of mind when he transported the men for prostitution. Combs knew what he was doing. He knew it was illegal because he said so in text messages to Ventura. Remember, she needed to make sure the escorts were not undercover cops. Comey also responded to the defense suggestion that Sean Combs couldn't have had an enterprise because its purpose wasn't illegal activity, saying, quote, an enterprise could have lawful and unlawful purposes. Quote, prosecutors aren't claiming Combs' companies themselves were illegal, but that they used some of the money to further those companies. She said Christina Coram and D-Rock were friendly with then Combs' girlfriend Cassie because it helped them get her back to Combs and do what he wanted. Quote, they were playing both sides. She then revisited testimony about Combs going after Kid Cudi and Eddie Garcia, who was the guy that took that bribe for the 2016 hotel video. And she again reiterated that Combs couldn't have done his dirty work without the help of his inner circle. She pushed back on the suggestion that the accusers enjoyed freak-offs and hotel nights, saying Ventura didn't have a financial incentive to lie on the stand. She had already secured $30 million in settlements from Combs and the Intercontinental Hotel, even before testifying at the trial. And she reminded jurors that Jane performed hotel nights out of obligation by 2023 when Combs was paying her rent. She also said during this rebuttal that, quote, being a domestic abuser is not a defense to sex trafficking. If part of the abuse is making your partner participate in a commercial sex act, you're guilty of sex trafficking. She again reminded the jury that if just one freak-off or hotel night out of all these freak-offs was sex trafficking, then that's enough to convict Combs for sex trafficking. All of them don't have to be the same situation. And in her own version of a mic drop, if you will, Comey may have had the quote of the trial when she said this, quote, for 20 years, the defendant has gotten away with his crimes. That ends in this courtroom. The defendant is not God. He is a person. And in this courtroom, he stands equal before the law. Overwhelming evidence proves his guilt. It is time to hold him accountable. Find him guilty. And I could not agree with that more. That's what all of this has been about. That is why I put out over 65 episodes covering this trial and the civil lawsuits before this. Fuck Sean Combs. And with that, 8 weeks of trial ended. And the jury was dismissed. And today, when you're hearing this, I'm recording this on Sunday, but you're going to hear it on Monday, the judge will issue instructions on deliberating to the jury, and we're going to get a verdict in short order, I have a feeling, within a couple of days. That's my prediction. And I have to say this, the defense, they did a lot of victim blaming today as it relates to Cassie, especially. And I find that personally despicable. It's disgusting. And I do not think that that will fare well with the jury. But we'll see. Thank you so much for listening. Check out the Patreon. I need your support on that Patreon because I did so many episodes of Sean Combs. I think some of my Patreon members were thinking I wasn't going to go back to my regular shit. And quite honestly, a few people dropped off, but I had to do this, y'all. This was a personal thing to me. It was something I have covered since the beginning. I don't want to say I broke this story of Sean Combs because I didn't. That lawsuit that Cassie put out in November of 2023 broke this thing. But I was the first one that I'm aware of that really covered it in detail, even before NBC, CNN, and every other freaking person that has jumped on this bandwagon. I covered this because it was that shocking to me, and I cared that this girl got justice in more than just monetary justice. So that's why I did it. Thank you so much for listening again. And until next time for Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.